because we've talked about the indictment against Letitia James. Y'all know her and James Comey were not going to back down without a fight. We had the Department of Justice that responded finally to Letitia James and James Comey saying, we want this dismissed. And the Department of Justice said, hey, listen, to both of you guys, when it comes to Lindsey Halligan being on this case, it's not going to happen. She was rightly appointed. She's allowed to be appointed. She's allowed to be the attorney in this case, and y'all have to deal with it. So now Letitia James, and I'm guessing soon James Comey, are asking to dismiss this entire indictment. And we're going to see what Letitia James is citing here in a second. But check this out from CBS in New York.
New York Attorney General Letitia James has filed a motion to dismiss her federal mortgage fraud case in Virginia. Late last month, James pleaded not guilty to 2 criminal counts of bank fraud and making false statements to a financial institution. In this new motion, she writes the indictment should be dismissed for vindictive and selective prosecution and is in violation of the Fifth Amendment. James says the president is targeting her because of speeches she made during her AG campaign and for fulfilling her duties as the attorney general.
And I mean, this is a lady that we've talked about who has basically ran her campaign on vindictive prosecution. She said, I'm going to get that man. Y'all watch, I'm going to get him. And I mean, technically she did. She won the lawsuit. Now, the judgment against President Donald Trump got dismissed, and it was a lot of money that got dismissed. We talked about that in another video. But now Letitia James said, hey, can you dismiss this? Because they're just being mean. This has nothing to do with the fact that I lied on my mortgage application, and I lied when I got homeowners insurance, and I lied to the IRS. They're just being mean, Your Honor. What does she have to say here? Letitia James asked the judge to dismiss mortgage fraud case, calling it vindictive and driven by Trump's animus. I'm surprised I could pronounce that word. New York Attorney General Letitia James asked a federal judge Friday to dismiss a mortgage fraud case against her, calling it vindictive and politically motivated prosecution brought at the behest of a president who regards her as an enemy. You don't say. This is a lady that for months said, I'm gonna get Trump, I'm gonna get Trump, I'm gonna get Trump, I'm gonna get Trump. I don't know if that's somebody that sounds like it's your friend. Either way, the motion, which had been expected, argues the case against James was driven by personal animus that arose out of James' civil fraud lawsuit against President Trump and his companies in her capacity as the state attorney general. The lawsuit and AG James' outspoken criticism of President Trump triggered 6 years of targeted attacks. President Trump and his allies have used every insulting term in their vocabulary to deride AG James and call for criminal penalties in retaliation for the exercise of her rights and fulfillment of her statutory duties to fulfill her obligations as New York State's Attorney General. Is she the only one who's allowed to do that? Lawyers for Letitia James wrote in urging that the case be dismissed. The name calling by Mr. Trump includes describing her as crooked, scum, a monster, and a criminal. Well, I don't know about all that. And that's what the filing says. The filing is similar to the one from another of Mr. Trump's perceived adversaries, former FBI Director James Comey, who has pleaded not guilty to charges of making a false statement and obstruction of Congress. If you guys haven't looked at the video we did on James Comey, I believe I dropped it yesterday. We talked about it over the weekend. James Comey is in even more trouble as a result of his indictment. And I think out of everyone, out of the 3 that were recently indicted, he's definitely up there near the top of people who might be in trouble. And he's been investigated for a while. This isn't just about Trump with James Comey. And it says with James Comey, Comey said the case against him is similarly vindictive and inspired by the president's desire for retribution. James is accused of lying on mortgage papers to get favorable loan terms when purchasing a modest house in Norfolk, Virginia, where her family lives. She pleaded not guilty last month and told reporters outside the courthouse that Trump administration was using the justice system as a tool for revenge. To bolster their claim of vindictive prosecution, Letitia James' attorney also asserted that the Justice Department has singled her out for scrutiny while ignoring apparent inconsistencies in the mortgage records of numerous other public officials. So is Letitia saying, hey, I'm not the only one that's doing it? That literally sounds like what her statement is. Not only she's not the only one who does it, but she knows of other people who were participating in this practice and maybe hasn't done anything about it. Yikes. They say the activities that form the basis of the indictment match the alleged conduct of other high-profile figures who have not been investigated or charged, including Republican Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who was accused of identifying 3 houses as his first home. The only meaningful difference between A.G. James and the individuals is that A.G. James is a Democratic Attorney General who spoke out against the president, while the others are his allies and cabinet members, defense lawyers wrote. Hey, listen. If you're a basketball fan, you will get this analogy. When you play basketball, there are people who you think and who you know you would love to have on your team. You would love to be your teammates. You'd love to have them as team members. They're going to do the things that need to be done. They might elbow somebody in the rib. If they know they got an ankle that's bruised, they're going to elbow that or kick it a little bit during the game. But you would never want to play against that person. If you see that person on the other side of the court, you might just sit down and be like, I don't want to play against them. And it seems like that's where we are with Letitia James and President Trump. You can't argue and say, hey, if you're going to use your power, you got to use over here and here and here and here. That's not how the system works. If that's the case, there'd be a lot of people in jail, maybe even Letitia James. But that's not how it works. You don't get to pick and choose and tell someone who they could prosecute. If that were the case, I have some names I need to write down personally. I won't mention them here. Like Comey, she was charged in Virginia by hastily appointed U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan, a White House aide who was named to the post by Mr. Trump, President Trump, after the resignation of the former acting U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert. After Siebert's resignation, President Trump, in a social media post, CBS News needs to get some respect. Why are they calling him Mr. Trump? Urged the Attorney General Pam Bondi to look into James and other political foes, noting that he had been impeached and indicted herself multiple times. Trump wrote that the administration can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility, adding, justice must be served now. Friday's court filing criticized Halligan's ascension to the job, writing that the president removed what he viewed as a final roadblock to his plan, interim U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert, and installed his own lawyers, Ms. Halligan, with the singular mission of churning out indictments against the political enemies. Ms. Halligan promptly obeyed. Comey and James are separately challenging their indictments on the grounds that Halligan is illegally named to her job, which is weak in my opinion. James was first elected in 2018 as New York State's top lawyer. After holding elected jobs in New York City, she is the first woman elected as the state's attorney general. Wow, congratulations to her. James has been a frequent target of President Trump, especially since she won a staggering judgment against the president and his companies, a lawsuit alleging he defrauded banks by overstating the values of his real estate holdings on financial statements. An appeals court overturned the fine, which had ballooned to more than $500 million with interest, but upheld a lower court's finding that President Trump had committed fraud. President Trump has denied all allegations against him, of course. Let me know what y'all think about this in the comments in the chat. Letitia James is still in more trouble because she's got some folks showing up outside her house. Check this video out. This is something I thought y'all would find interesting. The Department of Justice seems to be letting Letitia know what's about to go down.
New video obtained exclusively by CNN. It shows the director of the DOJ's weaponization working group, Ed Martin, posing for photos outside of New York Attorney General Letitia James's home last week.
Ed Martin was recently put in charge of the investigations into New York Attorney General Letitia James. There's an investigation looking into whether she committed mortgage fraud, and also an investigation that is looking into her civil lawsuit that was brought against Donald Trump, his adult sons, and the company. And you can see here on this video, Ed Martin is there with a colleague from the Department of Justice. He's outside of Letitia James's home, and he does pose for a photograph outside of that home. Now, he was on Fox News on Sunday, and he said that he was there because he had had meetings in New York and New Jersey, and that he decided to go by the home. He said you have to lay eyes on it, and also saying that you got to get a sense of what is at stake. But
man, yo, how would y'all feel if the Department of Justice was walking around outside your house? It wouldn't be great.
Letitia James's attorney, Albie Lowell, has pushed back. He wrote a letter to Ed Martin yesterday in which he highlighted this unusual visit to Letitia James' home, which they say is an intimidation tactic. He also pointed out that soon after being appointed to be leading this investigation, that Ed Martin called for James's resignation, and then also went on Fox News on Sunday and said that he wanted to look into every aspect of James's life, which some people would call a fishing expedition. So Lowell has said that, were there any doubts as to your political retributive mission? You erased them in your first statements about your appointment when you stated that your assignment is to, quote, stick the landing. A responsible and credible federal prosecutor is not a pommel horse gymnast. Now, I've spoken with other former federal prosecutors who also say that these moves are highly unusual, and it could have real-world implications if the grand jury were to return an indictment. This could be something that Letitia James' legal teams could use to argue to the judge that the jury pool has been prejudiced and that this was a selective prosecution. Of course, James has been criticized herself for campaigning on saying that she was going to investigate Donald Trump. She does have that court victory in the civil lawsuit where a judge has ordered Trump to pay $500 million. We reached out to the Department of Justice and they declined to comment.
Yeah, they don't need to talk about that. And another thing, the last thing I'm going to show you guys, I think it's a little ironic. This goes back to when Letitia James was going after the NRA and President Trump. And she had a very interesting quote I want to leave you with that I think applies to not only James Comey's indictment, but her indictment as well. Listen to this from CBS New York.
And now this just in, the National Rifle Association has filed for bankruptcy in federal court. The gun rights group says that it will move its headquarters from New York to Texas and restructure as a nonprofit there. New York State Attorney General Letitia James filed a lawsuit against the NRA back in August, and she released a statement just now reading in part, the NRA's claimed financial status has finally met its moral status.
Y'all hear that? Y'all hear Letitia James said that? Come on, Letitia.
The NRA's claimed financial status has finally met its moral status, bankrupt, and adds that she will not allow the NRA to, quote, evade accountability and my office's oversight.
Okay, so who's evading accountability now? Let me know what y'all think about this in the comments in the chat. Is Letitia James going to be held accountable? Will she come to regret those words? Or were they a little bit of foreshadowing when it comes to this indictment against her? Let me know what y'all think.